I want to talk today about my record of successful prediction since I predicted Ronald Reagan's reelection in April 1982, when the nation was in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression. 60% of Americans said Ronald Reagan was too old to run again, and his approval ratings were historically low. Over these 42 years, I have experienced every possible kind of criticism. It comes with the forecasting game. But I want to make clear that my predictions are predictions, not endorsements. They are strictly nonpartisan. They have nothing to do with my own political views. If I predicted according to my own views, I'd be wrong half the time. But in fact, I have predicted the two most conservative presidents of our time, not just Ronald Reagan, but also Donald Trump in 2016. And you can imagine these predictions did not make me very popular in 90% plus Democratic Washington, D.C., where I teach at American University. I have experienced serious criticism, but I've also experienced criticism that is scurrilous, vulgar, violent, and even threatening. But I don't want to talk about that kind of criticism. I want to talk about two criticisms that have arisen in recent years about the elections of 2000 and 2016. And I'll explain why the system correctly predicted the outcome of both of those elections based on the intent of the voters. When I appeared on the Bill Maher Show after my successful 2016 prediction, the first question he asked me was, how did you F up 2000 when you predicted Gore and George W. Bush won? And I said, I didn't F up that election. Florida did. The wrong person was elected president, and it was essentially a stolen election. I proved this in my report in 2001 to the United States Commission on Civil Rights. It's still up on their website. You can check it out. What the report showed is that overwhelmingly, disproportionately, Florida tossed out votes cast by 95% African American voters as compared to overwhelmingly white voters. And most of those votes tossed out for black voters were not those so-called hanging chads and dimples that were all over the news. This was essentially unreported. What they tossed out was so-called overvotes. That is, for good reason. African Americans didn't trust the system. After all, the governor was the brother of the Republican candidate. So on those crazy punch cards, which were unreliable, they punched in Gore, and then they wrote in Gore just to make absolutely sure no one could mistake their intentions. Florida threw out all of those votes despite the clear intention of the voters. Based on voters' intentions, as I showed in that report and a subsequent article in 2003 in the Journal of Legal Studies, Al Gore should have won Florida, going away, and won the presidency as well. That analysis was independently confirmed by Professor Walter Mebane of Cornell University in a study that I had nothing to do with. The study was entitled, "The Wrong Man is President!" And he additionally proved that based on the intent of the voters, Al Gore should have won Florida by tens of thousands of votes. And as a result of what Florida did, the wrong person was elected president. You know, we can relitigate that crazy election forever, but I would maintain that there's a very good case that I did not miss that election and called it correctly. 8 years after the fact, criticism has also emerged from my 2016 call, claiming that I did not really predict that Donald Trump would win the election, but only that he would win the popular vote. This criticism is based on a single out-of-context sentence from a social education article that I wrote that was completed before I made my final prediction in the Washington Post of September 23rd, 2016. The quotation says, as a national system, the keys predict the popular vote, not the state-by-state tally of electoral college votes. That's absolutely true. The keys do not look state by state. But those who cite that quotation fail to put it in context and fail to mention what I went on to say in that article, which was, despite not tallying state by state electoral votes, the simple integral parameters that define the keys to the White House still predict the winners and losers of the election, and that I was confident in predicting that Donald Trump would be elected in 2016, challenging all of the conventional wisdom and virtually every other academic and analyst. In fact, the compilers of polls were overwhelmingly convinced that Clinton would win and Trump would lose. The most eminent among them were the Princeton University consortium of, renowned professors headed by the great Sam Wang. And they give Clinton a 99% chance of being elected. And Professor Wang said, if I'm wrong, I'll eat a bug on national television. And to his credit, he did that. Now, my actual prediction made crystal clear that I was predicting a Trump victory. I made no mention of the popular vote. Instead, I said, and I quote, based on the 13 keys, it would predict a Donald Trump victory. So there could be no mistake. I further explained in that article when I made my final prediction that I was predicting who would govern over the next 4 years. Quote, and if 6 or more of the 13 keys are false, that is, they go against the party in power, they lose. If 6 or fewer are false, the party in power gets 4 more years, unmistakably talking about who would govern over the next 4 years, not who would have a plurality of the popular vote. I added, quote, so very narrowly, the keys point to a Trump victory, but I would say more to the point, they point to a generic Republican victory. In that same interview in September for the Washington Post, only excerpts were published. But in the full interview, the interviewer, Peter W. Stevenson, confirmed that at the same time that I predicted Trump's election, I also predicted, based on my gut, not on my system, that Trump would be impeached. The impeachment prediction made absolutely no sense whatsoever if I wasn't predicting a Donald Trump election. I also made clear in my 2016 book, Predicting the Next President, The Keys to the White House 2016, that was published well before my final prediction, that I was predicting who would be elected. I said, quote, if the nation fared well during the term, the executive party is reelected. If not, the White House changes hands. I went on to talk about how critical this election was to whether or not the Democrats, Obama's Democrats, would continue to govern and maintain the Obama legacy after 2016. I said, quote, the stakes are very high in this election for President Obama and his party. The Obama legacy cannot withstand a victory this year by a Republican presidential candidate, with presidential coattails likely assuring continued GOP majorities in Congress, Republicans would repeal the Affordable Care Act. I also went on to talk about, if Republicans win, in many other ways that they would repeal the Obama legacy. So clearly I was anticipating, predicting whether or not the Democrats would continue to govern over the next 4 years. My prediction of a Trump win, which I said, I took a lot of heat for in 90% plus Democratic Washington, D.C., was recognized and lauded by political figures and by top scholars and journalists. Donald Trump sent me a letter of congratulations right after the election, which said, "Congrats, Professor, good call," and signed in big Sharpie letters, Donald J. Trump. I was the co-winner of the Steckler Award for Courage in Forecasting. The Dean of American Political Science, Gerald M. Pomper, wrote that I stood alone, not only in predicting Trump's win in 2016, but having a successful record of predicting winners going all the way back to the 1980s. I was asked to, after my successful 2016 prediction, to present my system at the convention of the American Political Science Association, the leading organization of political scientists. Very rare for an historian to do that. And given my success, including 2016, my presentation was labeled one of the classic models of forecasting. And I want to quote from Chris Cillizza from 2016. He was the editor of the Washington Post political section, The Fix, and certainly one of the very few closest observers of the 2016 election. Cillizza unmistakably refers to my pre-election prediction, the heat it generated for me, and its extraordinary reception in the Post. There could be no stronger endorsement, although I have had so many. Quote, "At the end of every year, I like to look back on what the Fix did well and what it did well on the Fix. The answer this year, Allan Lichtman, Allan Lichtman, Allan Lichtman. In this election, his system suggested narrowly that Donald Trump would win at a time when you couldn't find anyone in big capital letters to say that on the record. But I was willing to do it, going against all the pundits, the pollsters, and virtually every other academic modeler." He went on to say, quote, "Of the 10 most trafficked posts on the Fix in 2016, 4 involved Lichtman and his unorthodox predictions. These 4 posts totaled more than 10 million unique visitors alone, and were 4 of the 37 most trafficked posts on the entire Washington Post website this year." There could be no stronger ratification of exactly what I predicted against all odds for Donald Trump's election in 2016. So I hope, this extended analysis, my extensive quotes from what I actually said in 2016, its reception at the time should put to rest any post facto, after 8 years, criticism that I really didn't predict Donald Trump's victory in 2016 and somehow missed that election.